I believe that I wasn't enough in my own skin. I believe that there had to be an outside component or an outside influence that would make me feel valued. Whenever I was in drugs and alcohol, I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like I belonged. I was likable. I was funny. I was better looking. I was wanted by people, and I like that idea. I like that feeling that that when I wasn't high, I felt sad. I felt alone. I felt out of place. If you look at my record, I have over 100, maybe about 100 felonies on my record of different kinds.
100?
I walked out of that hospital and walked straight into full blown addiction with crack cocaine and alcohol. I was homeless on the streets, panhandling, stealing, anything that I could do to feed my habit. Whenever you have to have an outside component internally make you feel better, whether that's a drug, whether that's a drink, whether that's a relationship, then you are supplementing something that only God can fill.
Have you ever had your identity stolen? And I don't mean your social security number or your driver's license. I'm talking about who you really are. Who are you? Do you believe your identity is tied to your earthly name or job? Do you believe that the harm done to you in the past defines you? Do you believe that the bad choices that you may have made are the person that you have to be the rest of your life? Our enemy, the devil, wants us to believe that our identity is based upon our past behaviors. He wants us to believe that we are forever tied to the evil things that have been done to us, or even what other people think about us. If I believe these lies, I start becoming the very thing that I don't want to be. And if left unchanged, I start to spiral downward, and this belief could ruin my life. How does a person break free from these false beliefs? Can God give me a new identity? And what does that look like? These are the topics that I want to discuss with our guest today as he shares his life change story with us. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. So, hey, friend, why don't you introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are?
My name's Henry Martinez, but everybody calls me Boomer. I'm the ministry leader of One City Recovery in Beaumont, Texas, at One City Church, along with my wife, Jeannie. And also, we are both national team members for Recovery Alive.
Fantastic. Well, Boomer, thank you so much for joining me today and taking time out of your afternoon to tell us your story. So, all stories have a beginning. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your beginnings? Where were you born and where were you raised?
I was born in 1974, Dallas, Texas. My mother, she was a she was single at the time, pregnant single, and I met my stepfather, and he took us both in, and thankful for that. And I come from a family I got two brothers and two sisters, and just lived in Dallas and just was doing the best that we could, you know.
So, are your two brothers and two sisters, are they from, you said that you were, your mom was a single mom and then met your stepdad. Are they from your stepdad or are they from your biological father?
They're from my stepdad, so.
Okay. What's the age difference? Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm fixing to turn 50 in October, so I'm the oldest, and then my brother JP would be next, and Clarissa, Melissa, then David is my youngest brother.
So tell me again how old you were whenever your mother married your stepdad.
Actually, she was pregnant with me, and when she met him, and thankfully, like I said, he took us both in and chose to raise me.
So as far as you're concerned, I mean, as a child, he was your dad, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was tell me a little bit about the dynamic of your childhood. What was it like growing up in your family? I mean, did, we talk a lot about in recovery dysfunction. Do you notice any dysfunctions now that maybe you didn't recognize when you were a kid, or what was things like there in your family?
I mean, we were tight knit, we had our arguments and issues like every other family. But I think for me, as I've been in recovery, as you say, what do you see now that was there then? And I think I always felt out of place because I had a different father, because I had a different name. You know, my last name's Martinez and theirs was Galvez. I was very aware of that as a kid, and I think that that awareness put me in a mindset of I'm not as good as they are because of, because of the different dad and stuff. And I think that for them that was hard to see because they weren't in that situation as I was. Um, they didn't love me different, but that's just a mindset that I had, and it's something that I realize now.
Did you ever meet your biological father as a child, or have you ever met your biological father?
He would pop up here and there, and just I guess for appearance purposes, and just wanting to be available when he could, but there wasn't really much there at all. So
So did you get along with your brothers and sisters, or did you guys were you close to them, or did you guys fight like cats and dogs?
we fought like cats and dogs with each other, and then we fought like cats and dogs for each other. We are working on those relationships now because of the things that I've been through, and we'll talk about that later on. But as kids, we were pretty tight knit.
How about your mom and your stepdad? Were you closer to either one of them?
I was rebellious, so that put us at odds a lot of times. My father was a hard worker. He went to work and paid the bills and expected us to live in a certain way and be responsible for ourselves. And I was still trying to find my way in life, and I probably made that a little bit difficult for both of them. So
So you said you were rebellious. When did that kind of start manifesting itself? I mean, was that, and you mentioned earlier that you felt out of place because your name was different than your brothers and sisters, your last name, and you think that played a part in some of that rebellion? I mean, when did that start coming out in you?
I think right when I hit junior high, because in junior high you start to be introduced to these cliques and groups and things, and I wanted to fit in so desperately that I was doing the things that I needed to do to fit in. I mean, sports was very big for me and my family growing up. But as I started getting older, other people started getting better at sports, and I was still at a level to where I knew that I wasn't going to go any further than maybe high school, or maybe junior as a junior, or something in high school. But so I started looking at outside groups and hanging out with them, different races. You know what I'm saying? Because we all would just group together and stuff. So identity was a big problem for me as a kid.
So what did you see yourself as? You know, you mentioned identity. We put on masks for the outside world, and then there's what we believe about ourselves. So what did you believe about yourself in junior high, high school? What did you believe about Boomer?
I believed that I wasn't enough in my own skin. I believed that there had to be an outside component or an outside influence that would make me feel valued. So I sought those things in peoples and groups, and fighting. You know what I'm saying? For attention and time, and fighting. With my hands, and with my hands, because when I won those types of battles, I was given that type of recognition, but that recognition is so misguided and misplaced that it was never enough.
So did sports play a part of your high school as well? And what sports was it? I mean, Texas is about football. Was it football, or was it baseball? Or, I mean, what sports did you get into? And were those groups separate from other groups?
So I played baseball, I played football, played basketball, and those were my sports. But when I got to ninth grade, I didn't play sports anymore. I played through junior high. And in ninth grade, everybody started to get a little bit bigger, and school started to get a little bit more harder, and these outside components and influences were affecting not only my life but my grades as well. So that's when I started, ninth grade, started skipping classes and not going to school, and then in turn that made things a lot more difficult at home.
So a lot of times in junior high, especially getting into high school, kids start exploring substances and different things with different groups. Was that your story as well? Did you start experimenting with some things and trying things that maybe you shouldn't have?
So I think it was my second try as a sophomore in high school was whenever I started to do some drinking and experiment here and there. But to be honest, I did drink. I was doing some drinking, but I was too nervous to do the chemical stuff. I just felt like that was going a little bit too far. But ultimately, I made that decision. I left school, and I started, smoking weed, and I started doing, cocaine at parties and stuff like that. So, and that, in this weird way, gave me a sense of purpose and feeling because I didn't feel like I would always feel, but I felt numb.
So let me ask you this question. I didn't ask it earlier. Was there any faith in your family? I mean, did your mom and dad go to church? Did you know about God? What did you believe about God?
There was, we grew up Catholic, and we went to church on Sundays, and the confirmation classes as well and stuff. But it wasn't a constant thing. I think there was a reverence for him in our house, but because of, if you don't do good, you're going to hell, and so, but as far as there was an idea of religion, but there was never an idea of relationship.
So let's stay in high school a little bit. You said you kind of dropped out of sports, and then you said you dropped out of high school. What year did you drop out?
Uh, I I I dropped out of high school my sophomore year. I did it two times, and two times was enough for me, and I left. So
What did your parents think about the whole you dropping out of school? I mean, did they care? I mean, was there a conflict there that you were dropping out? I mean, and man, a sophomore, I mean, that you're not even 18 yet. So, I mean, how did that go?
I mean, they didn't want it, they didn't want me to do that. But I was so rebellious and putting them in situations where, I was leaving and not coming home and just causing chaos at the house. And and my father was just very insistent that I needed to get my life together. And that put us at odds at a lot of time where some really heavy arguing, went down. And it was that it back then there was a different way to live. And it was like, if you're not going to live the way I'm asking you to in this house, then you need to find somewhere else to live.
Mm.
And I did that. I started living with friends, started couch surfing, and just hanging out at other places and drifting back home whenever I guess that I found I would find a way to go back. So eventually I kind of came to my senses, came home, and started working, started sacking groceries, working at little odd jobs here and there, warehouses through temp services. And about the age of 18 is whenever I met my ex-wife at that time. So, and I think that I had this weird logic that if I could, my family wasn't working out for me, so if I could start my own, then I could do things my own way. It's like, they don't know how my life is, so I want to live my life in the way that I want to. So,
So, did you get married when you were 18, or did you get married at all?
I met my ex-wife. We started dating, and we started living in her parents' house after a while, and we eventually started having some kids, and just was living life on life's terms in a weird way. I never could hold a steady job. I was going from warehouse or just different places that could employ me, but never being consistent in that, and always finding myself without a job and trying to raise my kids and be married as a young person, but not having a concept of how that really works.
So, how did that work with being a father so early? I mean, I'm assuming you said you guys got married when you were around 18. Did you have a child very quickly? Were you 19, 20? How old were you when you started having kids?
So my ex-wife, she already had a daughter, and that I felt like that was my daughter Deanna was kind of like me, having the opportunity to raise a child, I'm saying, and be an influence in her life. And we had, she had Deanna, and then we eventually had three other children, Alex, Lauren, and Nathan. And I love being a father. I was really good at being a dad before everything fell apart. But as far as being a man, I was very immature and uneducated and without a vision for that.
So you mentioned earlier a little bit of drinking, a little bit of weed, a little bit of marijuana. Did that continue after you got married and after kids got into the picture, or did you stop doing that? Would you even consider yourself an addict at that point?
I didn't think I knew what an addict was. I that that you know that word, it just didn't fit in my culture, you know. I remember I told somebody one time, because my ex-wife would used to get mad at me because I would drink a lot and, you know, party all night and come home early in the morning. And I told somebody, I said, maybe I'm drinking too much. And he looked at me, he said, you just don't know how to drink. And I was like, yeah, maybe you're right. You know what I'm saying? Maybe if I just only drink on Fridays or you know, on the weekends or something, and not drink during the week. So being an addict, or even thinking of myself as an alcoholic or an addict, was it wasn't in my mindset.
So, did faith ever come into play during that time in your life? I mean, you know, you got married, now you have kids. Did you ever have a conversation like, you know, we need to go to church and we need to take our kids to church? And I mean, was there any faith involved at all during that time?
Man, unfortunately, it was just, you know, church on Christmas, Christmas and New Year's, on those special occasions, maybe Easter. But uh, yeah, there was a, as I've said before in my testimony, there's knowing of God and knowing God. And unfortunately, for most of my life, at that time, I knew of Him.
So, how long did you stay with your first wife, and what happened?
So we were pretty volatile. We would, you know, stay together and break up. She would go to her parents' house, and I would go to my parents' house, and get back together. And then finally, my father passed away May 20th, 1999, and that was at that weeks prior. She had left me because I had left for a whole weekend. She was pregnant with my son, and nobody knew where I went. I took off on a bender, cocaine, alcohol, went to some friend's house and just did things that I wasn't supposed to do, and finally came home, and that was the beginning of the end for that season of my life.
Yeah. So, how long were you guys together then?
From 18 to about 23,
Okay. So,
and about 23 years old.
so you're 23 years old and you've got four children that call you father. And so how was that breakup? Was that difficult for you or not?
It was hard because there was a part of me that knew I wanted to be a father, um, but I just didn't know how. Um, you know, my concept of family was very skewed, very blurred. I was as a child, I was very big into watching movies and television shows, and you would see these perfect families on TV, and I would compare my family to those versions, and they didn't match, and I didn't like that, and I didn't understand why. But what I didn't understand was is those families on TV were a portrayal of the perfect family, which there really isn't one.
So you mentioned earlier about your identity as a youth. Did your identity change at all, or did you still feel like that you just weren't good enough?
Just felt like I wasn't good enough. And whenever I was in drugs and alcohol, I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like I belonged. I was likable. I was funny. I was better looking. I was you know, wanted by people. And I like that idea. I like that feeling that that when I wasn't high, I felt sad. I felt alone. I felt out of place, without value. So I didn't want to feel that.
So you mentioned, you know, again, you're 23. You're mentioning some things that sound to me like there was some addiction going on. Would you now classify yourself at that point at 23 years old? Would you classify yourself as an alcoholic or a drug addict?
Yeah, I was a drug addict. I just didn't know what that meant. You know, whenever, as I've learned in recovery, whenever you have to have an outside component internally make you feel better, whether that's a drug, whether that's a drink, whether that's a relationship, then you are supplementing something that only God can fill. And I was doing that on a regular basis, and I was getting too good at that.
So you're 23, you've got four kids, and you're now divorced and living outside the house. So where did that path lead you next?
Uh, like I said, May 20th, 1999, my father passed away in Dallas, Texas. And that day, I say this, that day my father left, and so did I. Uh, that began my walk into crack cocaine for the next few years. I quickly picked up my first felony within that year of 1999, and that was the beginning of the end for me. If you look at my record, I have over 100, but maybe about 100 felonies on my record of different kinds.
100?
Almost, yeah. But I'm going to say felonies, misdemeanors. I think my wife, my new wife, which we'll probably talk about later, when she did a Google search and did my background check off the Texas Department of Public Safety, I mean, I got like 15 pages of information on me of what I've done. So I walked out of that hospital and walked straight into full-blown addiction with crack cocaine and alcohol. I was homeless on the streets, panhandling, stealing, anything that I could do to feed my habit.
So you just split up, and then your father died, and then you just went off the deep end, it sounds like, and you started that.
Yeah.
So now I know that there's a difference between jail and prison. So I'm assuming, as you're getting arrested and then you go into jail for a little bit, you're coming out. Did you ever spend any hard time when in prison, or what happened during that time frame?
Yeah, collectively from 99 to till recently, till 2017, collectively I've done over 15 years in prisons, jails, county jails, treatment centers, rehabs, halfway houses. So I would say, I mean, hard time I've done over 15 years collectively.
Wow.
But about 20 years of just adding the county jails and treatment centers and halfway houses.
So tell me about your experience a little bit in prison. I'm sure the first time was very difficult, but what was your life like in prison? I know that there are lots of segregation, that there's gangs, different things in there. Did you ever, what groups did you get into in prison, and what was your prison life like?
So the first time it was I was mad, I was angry, I was in the perfect place to be that, it was kill or be killed kind of mentality. I fought a lot. I was angry. I was mad. Everybody had left me. I wasn't getting visits or mail or anything like that. So I gravitated towards the Mexican prison gangs and hung out with them because it was like a family that I needed, and it was also just an accountability to have in that setting.
So let me ask you, whenever you mentioned, your accumulative time. So I'm assuming you went into prison for a little bit and then you got out and came back in. Is that accurate? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm just asking, what made Boomer, I mean, apparently your prison experience wasn't so bad that you said, I'm never going back there again. I mean, you came out and you started repeating that cycle of insanity again. So what was the thinking in your mind? When did you just say, prison's better than living out here? Or, why was there any deterrent there to not go back?
This might sound very strange to somebody that hasn't been in prison, but whenever you've gone off the deep end and you find out that you can survive it, it's like, okay, I know that if I do get to that point again, I can make it in prison. Everybody has these things of, oh my God, I don't want to go to prison. But when you go to prison and you find out it's survivable, well, I still have a drug addiction. I still want to live my life in that way, shape, or form. And if I go to prison, it is what it is because I've survived it before. I can do it again. From those prison sentences that I did, I was in and out, in and out, in and out. Like I would get released from prison and I would be back in county jail within 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. So let me ask you this. While you're in prison, did you have any God experiences at all? Was there any faith? Did anybody approach you that way? Can you look back and see how God was trying to pursue you then or not?
So for the people that don't have this type of knowledge, a lot of times the prison chapels there were the places where people went to exchange contraband, exchange information about fights or riots or things that were going on, and I would go and we would have our little meetings there inside the church while the service was being held. And when I was in there, I would feel like this. There's something here that I'm supposed to be doing besides what I'm doing right now. You know, um, there was a there was this acute awareness of there's a chance for change in this place if I were to give myself to it, but I was so scared of change. Um, I knew that God was called God the Father, and I knew that my relationship with my earthly father wasn't good. So I didn't want to put myself in the situation of making God mad because I made my own father mad and failing him as well. So I just kept this safe distance from him, respected him, but kept this safe distance from him.
So during that time frame, in and out, what was your, did you continue? Did your heart continue to grow hard? I mean, where was the turning point? Where did you experience your low?
So in April of 2012, I arrived on the Cofield unit, which is one of the largest prison facilities in the state of Texas. It's a 4,000 man unit, and I didn't understand why I was there because it was what was called a lifer unit. Everybody there is doing 30 years and plus. They're not going home. I mean, it was a pretty crazy place, and I remember I was in my prison cell, and there was a guy that was a few cells down. He was in there for I think manslaughter or something like that, and his family would visit him every weekend. He would have commissary every week or whenever he went to store. He got letters, he got magazines, he got books. He had all these pictures of all these family functions. And yet here I was in prison for drugs and stealing, not hurting anybody, not taking anybody's life. But there I was all by myself, all alone, and I was so mad because in my eyes, what he had did paled in comparison. What I did was minimal compared to what he did. And I had a bunch of Bibles that I kept in my locker because heavy Bibles made for a weight bag. I'd put them in a bag and I would lift weights with them in my cell. And one day I just got mad and I said God, all I want is a letter. That's it. I need somebody to write me. And I sat down and opened up the Bible and I opened it up to the book of Ephesians. And at the very beginning it says to the people of Ephesus, all the faithful saints, and then at the very end of that structure, I said, and to Boomer on Cofield, grace to you and peace from our Lord Jesus Christ, and that completely blew my mind because I had just got a letter from somebody, and I had got a letter from somebody that was writing about Jesus Christ while he was in prison, and he wrote a letter to somebody 2,000 years later to me who was in prison.
Wow. So that's kind of how God got a hold of you there. You felt like that you got a letter from God a little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I quickly found out that in Paul's letters, every one of them were like that at the very beginning. So I was adding my name into those letters when I read those books, Colossians and everything else, and I really liked what I felt and what I started thinking after that. Because Ephesians, the book of Ephesians, laid the groundwork for who I would be. I tell people that I sponsor and mentor. Ephesians tells you who you are, how you're called to live, where you're seated, when you get the opportunity to have a wife, how to treat her, how to live, and then more importantly, how to arm yourself against the world whenever the world comes against you.
So as you read that letter in Ephesians and you personalized it, so how did you, I mean, did you go talk to the chaplain? I mean, or did you just stop right there and pray to God? I mean, tell me a little bit how did you accept that into your life?
So I started walking that out. That last prison sentence that I did, that last 10-year sentence that I got. When I walked in there, I let go of my affiliation with the prison gang that I had been tied to before. I wanted to live my life differently. Didn't want that. I was tired. We say in our groups, broke, busted, and disgusted. And I felt like I needed to do something different. And God found me at the right time. And I started walking it out by going to church. I went to Celebrate Recovery on the Inside there. Started going to things like Kairos ministries that came in, Mike Barber. Started filling my time and my mind with things that I had never really thought before. books like from Battlefield of the Mind with Joyce Meyer, just different things like that. Books that were feeding me spiritually and mentally. We had a ministry come to our prison, and they were baptizing people in a cow trough in the gym. And I went into the water, and this old man, he said, what you bring in here, let it stay here in this water. And I started crying, and I told God in that moment, I said, God, I have a tendency to take something from the outside and put it on my inside because I don't like the way I feel in here. So what I need you to do is I need you to take that desire to use drugs and alcohol and replace it with something so I can't fill that spot again. And he just gave me a passion for helping people that have gone through the things that I've gone through, offering up the million mistakes that I've made and the felonies that I've committed, and using them as a standard for somebody to make the right decision. And in that water, I came out a brand new man. I'm not perfect. I still, struggle with things. Identity is still a problem for me sometimes. But in that water, I came out of there and I understood who God was, but more importantly, I knew who Jesus was. And I was able to develop a relationship with him that sustains me to this day.
So how much longer did you have to serve on your 10-year sentence then? I mean, how much longer were you in prison after you accepted Christ?
I got released in 2017, and I was sent to Beaumont, Texas, to go to a halfway house. And I was doing really good for the first 3 months. And I got a job with somebody, and we would start working, and he would leave me at the job site for like an hour or so during lunchtime, and he would come back. And finally, one day, the house we were working on, the lady goes, "Why does he keep leaving you here?" And I said, "I don't know. He goes to lunch." And she said, "Well, okay." So she talked to him. He said, "You have to go with me from now on whenever I go to lunch." I said, "Okay." I don't know what the big secret is. Well, he would go and drink during lunch. So they say that if you keep going to the barbershop, you're eventually going to get a haircut. So I would go with him to the bar, and I would get a Coke or a Sprite or something. And then one day it was like, I never had a problem with alcohol. I had a problem with drugs. And so I decided to drink again. So I took my first drink, and it was over. A month later, I went back to prison. But when I didn't go back to that halfway house, my sponsor called me, and he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm in a hotel room. I'm fixing to go back to Dallas. I'm done. It's over with," because I had told my kids and I told my family I changed my life. I found Jesus. My life will never be the same again. I'm a brand new man. And here I was in a hotel room fixing to throw it all away. Right? Joe said, "Would you please do me a favor and come back to church on Wednesday before you do anything, because there's people that want to pray for you there." I went to church. I met a guy named Jason, and he said, "I have a word from the Lord for you." He said, "Do you mind if I tell you?" I said, "Yes, of course." He said, "You're going to go back to prison, and it's there that the Lord is going to show you exactly what your ministry is going to be." So I went back to prison, and it was there that God really showed me exactly what I would be doing for the rest of my life.
So you're at a halfway house, you get a job, and you get connected with this guy. You go to a bar, you take a drink, and then you're hooked, I guess, alcohol. And you said a month later you were back in prison. So what did you do? I mean, did you sell drugs? Did you steal something? I mean, what was it that you did that I mean, because you had already accepted Christ, right? I mean, you'd already started changing a little bit. So what, lead me through some of the events that got you back into prison.
When I got out, I was on parole.
Okay.
So there was requirements and stipulations that I had to live by. I had to live at that halfway house. I had to be in it at 6 o'clock, and I was required to do certain things because of the parole conditions. When I drank and I didn't go back to the halfway house, that immediately put me on the road back to prison. So when I got there, I was given the opportunity to be a part of a program called Peer Education.
Okay.
And in Peer Education, we would meet on Tuesdays and Fridays, and basically we would take all the new arrivals and put them in a gym, and we would talk about the rules of the prison, the different departments, the department heads, what the rules and regulations were, what the expectations of that unit were. And then on Friday, we talked about things like STDs, STIs, health issues that we face when we go through addiction, and I'd given them information as far as what to do after you get out. So I went in at the end of 2016, okay, and then I got released in December of 2017. But in that peer education department, one day I was sitting there, and I saw somebody with their head down. It looked like he was crying, right? And I went up to him and said, "Hey, are you okay?" He said, "Man, I'm just going through it. You know, my mother's sick. I don't know what to do. I'm going to be here for another 30 days, and I can't be with her. And I can't help her." And I was like, "Man, that's tough." And when I walked away, I asked myself, why didn't I just pray for him right there? And I never felt that unction to do that at all. I mean, I'd pray for myself and go to church whenever the last time I was locked up. So I went to the peer education coordinator and I said, "Do you mind if I ask people if they want to gather up and pray after this is over with?" And she said, I don't mind at all." And I said, "Okay." So I grabbed the microphone at the conclusion of that and I said, "Hey," I said, "if anybody wants to stay and pray, let's get together and pray." And that first prayer circle that I called, it had 4 people in it. And eventually I kind of started getting bolder with that. I started working with the chaplain. I was occupying my mind again with those things that had saved me before. And eventually I was praying for the chaplain. I was praying for guards and faculty people there. And the last day that I was there, we had over 180 people in a prayer circle praying for so many different things, and it was incredible.
So you
And,
went from 4 to 180.
180, yes. And that's hard in prison because there's so many different religions and races that can cause a lot of problems. But never once did we have anybody complain about the prayer circles that we were having. And 2 days of unit rules and STDs and STI conversations became the gospel undercover. So it was incredible.
So how long did you spend there before you got out?
I spent about a year and about 4 months there.
And what prison was that again?
I was at the Henderson unit.
Okay. Did you go to another halfway house? And, did you get involved in some kind of recovery program? Tell me what happened after you got out that time.
So I went back to Dallas to the Salvation Army, and I completed 60 days there. At that time, I was still in my Bible. I was doing really, really well. I was going to recovery meetings, and in recovery is where I met my girlfriend, and we started dating. And when my time was up at the Salvation Army, I moved to Tyler, Texas, to be with her. We started going to Celebrate Recovery again outside. Started going to church, and just determined to do good, do better. So we eventually got married a year later after we came back to. I came back to Beaumont to give my testimony at Celebrate Recovery, and it was there that the Lord really just showed us what we would eventually be doing as a couple. What I've learned is in recovery is that just because you recover, people don't recover with you, and there's a lot of things that my addiction has done to people, and made them live in a certain type of way, very protective of their feelings, very protective of their time and their energy and their space. And I've had to work on that because I walked out of prison and I've walked into ministry and I've said, you know what, I'm sober now, I'm serving the Lord, so everything should be back to normal. But unfortunately, recovery just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So tell me, you were in and out quite a bit. So what's kept you free?
It was getting honest with myself. It was getting honest with the program of recovery, because it's easy to walk the 12 steps of recovery, but it's a lot harder to walk out the 12 steps of recovery. It's real easy to walk up and say that, I admit that I'm powerless over my addictions and compulsive behaviors and my life has become unmanageable. But it's like, well, what does that mean? Why am I like that? And I've come to find out that identity, my inability to have an identity, really pushed me into those things. So my identity in Christ has allowed me to face a lot of the stuff that took me under a long time ago, and I have victory over those things every day.
So what's your identity now?
Oh man, I'm a faithful believer in Jesus Christ who's overcome drugs and alcohol addiction.
Fantastic, brother. So were there any verses or anything that really, now you mentioned Ephesians, and that's got to be a powerful thing for you to go back, because that was the letter, that really it seemed like that was a real milestone event in your life. But are there any other verses that have been inspirations, for you during recovery?
I think Psalms 19:14. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. That is the only filter that I will ever use on my life, because what that means is that when I partner my thoughts and my actions with God, then I don't have an opportunity to act out in flesh or say things that I shouldn't say, because I've given God that permission to say I approve of this or I don't approve of this. That conviction of the Holy Spirit has led me to so many places that pride never could.
So whenever you say you're sober from what?
I'm sober from drugs, which is cocaine, crack, methamphetamines, any things that would change my mindset and my moods, alcohol, cigarettes. I'm free of all that.
Praise God, man, that's awesome. Well, now you mentioned that you're kind of in ministry, so tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about what kind of ministry you're in and what you're doing.
So me and my wife are the ministry leaders of One City Recovery, and we are part of the Recovery Alive program. And up 2 weeks ago, we were named national coaches for Recovery Alive. So it's been a fun thing. Our home group's a little bit different. We have about 4 halfway houses that come to our group, and we have anywhere from 75 to 100 people every night at our meetings, and it's just incredible, because we're not only introducing people to recovery, but we're also introducing people to the gospel, and we're fulfilling that commandment of that great commission. We're not only making disciples of these individuals, but we're also sending them out with a message that can change not only their life but their family's life. Today, just because I'm sober, it doesn't mean I don't go through stuff. I battle with frustration, with anger, and there's moments like when I get invited to go talk to different people in different groups, that I walk in and I'm like, I'm wearing my felonies all over my clothes, and like people know that I've done these things and I shouldn't be in this room. But when I partner with the Holy Spirit, I'm capable and I'm able to do, things that I never could do on my own. So I guess what I would tell somebody is that you have to give yourself a chance to recover. If nobody else will, you can give yourself a chance to recover.
So if you're stepping in an elevator with someone and they just said, "Hey, who are you and what's your story?" And you got about 60 seconds to tell them what's the theme or the message of your story that maybe you want our listeners to hear.
I always ask people, what is their why? Why do you do what you do? And that question will provoke a lot of questions. My why is I was a son saved to serve, and when people find out their why, their destination becomes a whole lot clearer.
Boomer, thanks so much for sharing your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you have been believing lies about yourself, maybe the enemy has led you to believe that you are just a product of your past. Maybe you have found your identity in what you believe others think about you. These are lies from the enemy to distract us and make us ineffective. John 1:12 says, "To all who believe in Jesus Christ and accept Him, He has given the right to become a child of God." If you have had your identity stolen and maybe you want your life back, or maybe you need a new life, Jesus Christ is waiting to change your life, just like He did for Boomer. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Hey, if you are still listening and you like this podcast, I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes because they will help to inspire change in your life. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a positive review because it helps to bring this podcast to others. But no matter what, may God bless you and may God bring positive change to your life.